Now that we have all the panelists on stage, as I just mentioned, that the topic for this session is Future of International Trade and Customs, Challenges Ahead. We will begin by an address by Mr. Kunio Mikuriya, Secretary General, World Customs Organization. Can we have the video, please?
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure and honor to speak in front of the prominent personalities on this auspicious opportunity. The COVID pandemic has had a huge impact on the trade landscape, but at the same time, it has accelerated our reflection on the sustainability, adaptability, and reliability of the current international trading system, especially global trade supply chains. From the very beginning of the pandemic, the WCO has worked closely with the customs administrations and the private sector as well as international organizations to maintain the sustainability of international supply chains and to support the recovery of world trade. The question in front of us are how to keep the momentum going and how to enhance it. Bearing this in mind, the WCO has developed numerous instruments, tools, and programs that contribute to realization of resilient supply chains and trade facilitation. For example, to address the e-commerce, the WCO adopted a framework of standards that advises customs to receive electronic advance data from the relevant service providers in a standardized way to secure and facilitate the ever-thriving e-commerce, especially under the COVID-19. The World Trade System is not a self-contained system. Rather, it rests on a global governance ecosystem that involves political, economic, social, environmental, and technological aspects. Customs is an important part of the ecosystem and has wide-ranging impact on those aspects. Of course, multilateralism remains the underlying principle for designing our policies in pursuit of economic growth. Together with other international organizations, the WCO is dedicated to the maintenance and enhancement of multilateralism, as shown in the case of e-commerce in support of trade facilitation. With the progress in so-called Industrial Revolution 4.0, a number of innovative technologies have emerged, such as blockchain, Internet of Things, and big data. Those technologies are transforming the working environment for customs and will bring significant change and benefit to trade and customs operations. The WCO monitors the waves of technological innovation and explores the opportunities new technologies provide. On the other hand, technology could pose challenges to customs in the fight against illicit trade. Organized crime would exploit the technologies to conceal their offenses well in advance of law enforcement agencies. Therefore, customs administrations need to improve their knowledge and improve their capacities in investigating technology-related customs offenses. Emerging technologies are also adding complexity to the legal frameworks through which customs operations are empowered. To what extent customs can utilize the technologies, whether the technology-based enforcement by customs can ensure accuracy and authenticity, as well as data security and privacy. These are some of the questions for us to deal with. The questions may trigger customs administration's efforts in policy experimentation and regulatory sandboxes for more up-to-date legal frameworks. In recent regional trade deals, customs plays an increasingly important role. Customs engagement in preferential trade agreement has gone beyond the traditional fiscal measures to include protection of society, such as environmental protection, intellectual property, and anti-corruption, as well as economic competitiveness. While customs is often regarded more as an implementation agency rather than a policymaker, customs should be able to provide policy advice through providing data as a basis for evidence-based decision-making. Another contribution of customs could come from its good partnership with other government agencies and business. Hence, the WCO calls on our member customs administrations to strive for a leading role in their National Committee on Trade Facilitation as exemplified by the CBIC. To discharge its function properly, customs needs to increase its visibility to the public and civil society to improve the compliance environment. Regular communication with the public and dissemination of customs information via websites, social media, and dialogues are essential. Customs administrations across the world share similar missions, but their implementation capacities differ vastly in terms of human, financial, and technological resources. This situation could result in a weak linkage in the global supply chain and might harm connectivity and thus hamper economic and social development in a harmonious way. To address this potential deficiency, the WCO provides best practices and forums for exchanging experiences. It also offers further cooperation in providing capacity building support to members in need, thanks to financial support by donor administrations. In this regard, I appreciate India's effort in joining other members in providing the WCO with a Customs Cooperation Fund in support of WCO capacity building programs. Moreover, the increasing number of customs administrations have implemented the WCO's safe framework of standards, including the Authorized Economic Operators, or AEO program, to provide more facilitative measures to compliant traders, which is realization of customs business partnership. They gradually move forward towards mutual recognition agreement on AEO with a number of MRAs reaching more than 90. The MRAs between members have become part of the international framework for customs contribution to international trade growth. On the other hand, the Customs Mutual Assistance Agreement, CMAs, signed between customs administration by different WCO members enable the exchange of information and the joint enforcement for compliance purposes. At a multilateral level, WCO has developed the instrument and the guidance to enhance customs cooperation. The mission of facilitating cross-border trade cannot go without multi-stakeholders' efforts, including customs, tax, trade, transport, or quarantine, and banking. In the context of trade facilitation, there are huge demands for reducing documentation requirements, simplifying formalities and procedures, and improving transparency and predictability in the trading system. Customs administrations therefore need to tighten cooperation with other authorities in the spirit of coordinated border management. For instance, when it comes to simplifying invoice processing, data sharing between customs and tax authorities via a common e-platform is critical. Ensuring stable revenue is a top priority of many governments. Given that customs and tax administrations share the same taxpayers and potential tax evaders, customs and tax authorities could mutually support their activities by the exchange of information as evidenced from the experience in India. Other areas of customs tax cooperation involves conducting joint investigations, controls, audit, and operations. WCO also welcomes tax authorities and other relevant government agencies to join efforts and establish a multi-agencies or even single government AEO programs to bring more coordinated border management benefits to AEOs. Well, thus far I talked about the WCO initiatives in improving efficiency and effectiveness of customs administrations. Also, I touch upon the usefulness of cooperation between customs, tax, and other government agencies. I hope that India could provide best practices in this area to improve business climate and inspire other countries to follow. Thank you very much.
So that was Mr. Kunio Mikuriya, Secretary General, World Customs Organization. And now extending the session further, I would like to invite Mr. M.S. Mani, Partner, Deloitte, Touche, Tohmatsu, India, LLP, to please share his thoughts on future of international trade and customs, challenges ahead.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure hearing the Secretary General of WCO speaking to all of us over here. And quite a few things that, now I was not aware of what he's going to speak today, but quite a few things on which I was planning to focus, he has already discussed. So I don't certainly want to repeat that. For instance, sustainability of global supply chains, which has really come under threat because of the pandemic over the last 2 years. And that's a major, major issue which is really going to bother all of businesses and every single business. So let me speak on something else because he has spoken at length on that subject and he's more of an authority on the subject than I ever will be. Keeping that in mind, there are a few observations that I wanted to make in respect of the time that I have been allotted, which is the next 8 minutes. The first is that the World Customs Organization has a private sector consultative group. I'm not aware of how many of us are aware of this. So there is a PSCG which is set up by the WCO, which essentially is all the private sector participants. It includes corporates, it includes manufacturers, it includes logistics service providers and everybody else. And the World Customs Organization over a period of time keeps doing what is referred to as an environment scan. Some of us may have heard the word environment scan, but here the environment is not the environment as in climate, but environment as in the business environment for global trade and customs. So when they do the environment scan, they have decided a methodology for the scan, which is called PESTLE. PESTLE stands for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and geopolitical. So they have gone ahead and have had this methodology for quite some time, which is largely with private sector participation. Now, what has this led to? The first thing that they have done using PESTLE is to ensure that at any point of time, they build various business models and check the sustainability of those models in a global economic environment framework. So during the pandemic, for example, some of the recommendations which were made by the PSCG got tested. Some of the consequences were desirable on expected lines. Some of them were completely unexpected. So let me just give one or two random examples which come to my mind. Globally, once the pandemic started, there was a broad agreement in all countries that PPE suits should become part of the exempted list. They should not be through a canalized agency. There should be no restriction, and every country followed it within a span of, say, 1 week or so. WCO was very successful in getting this done. But what someone forgot in the subtext was what happens to the components which make a PPE suit. What happens to the basic textile fabric that goes into a PPE suit? What happens to the thread? There are certain specific kind of buttons that go into a PPE suit. What happens to those? So while PPE suits got exempted, the components of PPE suit did not get exempted. And if the components do not get exempted, how will they get manufactured when they flow across countries? This was one illustration of a recommendation which was focusing on the final product and did not focus on the components. The other aspect in terms of the pandemic which comes to my mind immediately was the issues that many countries, including what we had in India, in respect of getting empty containers. So there was a large volume of export business which exporters in our country and many other countries for instance, the African countries were targeting. And after the first 3 months of the pandemic-induced lockdown, most businesses were up and running. Most manufacturing businesses started. They had export orders, the pricing was agreed, people wanted business revival, but they hit an air pocket. And what was that air pocket? Something as simple as not having empty containers to the destination where you want to send your goods. Now, it is incredible that despite the fact that many businesses have struggled with getting containers, this year, we are expecting our merchandise exports to touch $400 billion. I believe we have already reached 360 in the 11 months. And in the last month, if we do $40 billion, we are heading to $400 billion of merchandise exports. When we combine that with roughly $250 billion of service exports, it's a big number in a year where we have just come out of the pandemic. But what would have been the exports if we didn't have a container shortage? That is something which we should think of. There are also various issues which do not get addressed at various points of time. For instance, sometimes when all of us as citizens shop on Amazon, you find that some of the products that Amazon sells on their website come from global. They are not sold by an Indian manufacturer. So when you try to buy some very good management textbook, it comes from some other country. But in the global framework for e-commerce that has been set by WCO, there is no distinction between B2B and B2C supplies. Now, if I as a consumer am ordering a book, it is a B2C supply, which possibly does not need to go through the rigor of a B2B supply. I'm not going to buy one book and evade customs duty on that or GST on that. So there has to be a differentiation in global e-commerce in respect of B2B and B2C supplies. This is again an area which has not been focused enough. We also have to bear in mind whenever we talk of World Customs Organization that it is a body that largely focuses on communication, cooperation and goodwill. It is not a body which is able to enforce any mandate on any country. So we have a World Customs Organization which is prevalent. We still don't have a World Border Organization. So in the days to come as we go along, possibly there is a need also for a World Border Organization, which will have a mandate to regulate customs across the country. So keeping this global trade in background, if I move to customs, and I can see I have 3 minutes left, on the customs side, what has been seen in most of the countries is that customs has been functioning more as a tax collection agency and as a regulator of prohibited goods or goods where the import should be discouraged. That has been largely the mandate of customs. And the facilitation of international trade or the facilitation of bilateral trade actually has become a byproduct for customs. It's one of those things that is very nice to have, but it's not essential to have. If this framework again changes, because if bilateral trade increases, the customs collection will go up. If international trade goes up, the customs collection will grow up. We have seen some examples of private sector and the customs authorities in various countries collaborating through the PSHG. One example that we have seen in India is in respect of authorized economic operator. So the AEO is a very good example where the customs authorities say that, look, we trust you. And the AEO operator also is bound to ensure that all their transactions are above board. That's an excellent example that we have seen in recent times. If we have more partnership-related arrangements where the customs authorities treat themselves as facilitators of international trade, not a regulator of prohibited goods, not merely a tax collector similar to income tax and GST, then possibly we'll see a very big boom in international trade. In order to do that, we have to bear in mind that we are now seeing two trends worldwide on global trade. We are seeing a focus on many countries becoming insular, many companies trying to become self-sufficient, which in some ways is designed to limit global trade. We are also seeing more and more globalization and more of interdependence. Now, while these two things may seem to be contradictory, they have to be balanced. We have seen that in many of the policies that our government has announced over the past few months and weeks, where we have seen that there is a focus on manufacturing in India. So the finished product import into India is being discouraged in some form, but the import of components is being encouraged in some form. Possibly over a period of time, in all the global flows that we will see more and more of this. So that is all that I could share in the 8 minutes or so. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. M.S. Mani, for sharing your views. We would like to now pass on next to Mr. Om Hisaria, Senior VP, Reliance Industries, to share his thoughts on the subject.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Tax India Online, for having this discussion and having me and this panel here to discuss this topic. I would concentrate more. This topic has two parts. One is challenges in international trade and challenges in trade and customs. About customs, most of the issues that are relevant we have discussed. I would like to focus on how we see the challenges in trade in the coming years. Mr. Mani just referred that we are seeing insularity. The trend of liberalization and globalization that we witnessed over the last 20 years, it's seeing brakes being put on it. So what are the reasons for these brakes? And if these brakes are being put, then how do we look at that $1 trillion goods and services export target that our government is trying to have for the economy in the next 5 years? To me, the way I look at it 2001 as a watershed moment when China acceded to WTO. By joining WTO, China had access, a most favored nation access, to the whole of developed world, the West. They moved from that year-to-year system of American Congress giving them a pass to trade with China to a stable trade regime with the whole of the world. The next 15 years at least saw a relentless growth in what we call the distributed manufacturing model. Like, you are not manufacturing one particular commodity at one particular location or a nation. That distributed manufacturing model, and that led to establishment of very complex supply chains. All that was fine. It went on for 12 to 15 years without much obstacles or hindrances. Along with this came, the WTO multilateral system, the trade benefit, that is based on certain assumptions, that you abide by the rules, so all participants in the trade benefit. But unfortunately, the China's opaque economic system, which is still, people do not consider market-driven economy, they did not play, I would like to put it on record that perhaps they did not play it by rules, the kind of IPR violations that the world saw, the kind of ASCM, Agreement on Subsidies and Countervailing Measures violation that China made, and that went undetected, unchallenged. Firstly, the world didn't know how to react. And secondly, perhaps the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO was not geared to handle that kind of, or that scale of infringement of rules. As a result of this, we see that, again, very differentiated benefits of globalization, trade globalization. On one hand, if I take US example, we had Silicon Valley, which prospered beyond dreams because of this globalization. But at the same time, we had the Rust Belt of Midwest, the industrial wasteland. And when the welfare was, when the gains were generated, there was no mechanism set to distribute these gains from the gainers to the losers. Combined with this, the relentless pursuit of mercantilist ideas by Chinese. I'm using very strong words, which perhaps I should not have been, but I feel very strongly about it, so I can't really prevent that. So these 2-3 things, and then came pandemic. The complex supply chains that we had. Let's take an example. Like you have a supply chain depending on 5 countries. 4 of them are having lockdown, one wants to operate. When one is ready to operate, the other one has lockdown. So these kind of supply chains became kind of, at least it looks unsustainable. So the distributed production manufacturing model, that again needs to perhaps be made more simple. Supply chains, from the globalization of supply chains, perhaps a regionalization of supply chains has to happen. So, and then the discontent, like trade doesn't operate in a vacuum. Trade is a result of geopolitical stability and cordiality. We see these signs. Brexit, after 10 years of negotiation, US withdraw from Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. After engaging for 7 years, India withdrew from RCEP. The Doha round, which was started in 2001, remains inconclusive. So there are challenges, and perhaps we are seeing at least next 5 to 10 years where the trade growth is going to be muted. The countries are looking at a China plus model. The countries are looking at supply chains and manufacturing models which are more resilient to the shocks like COVID, say a Ukraine war. In last 20 years, this is the first time we are seeing 2 Western world countries, 2 relatively developed nations getting engaged into a armed conflict. This will of course have impact on the trade and trade relations. Having said that, where do we find the space or scope for India to reasonably achieve the target that we have of $1 trillion of goods and services export? There are 2 trends very clearly which I can see. One is China plus 1 model, which many of the countries, they are so much heavily invested in China, not just money-wise, their dependence-wise, that they simply can't shut it off. So most of them are thinking of China plus 1. So we definitely have enough headroom, given our small share in the world trade. We have enough headroom to operate on that and get onto that China plus 1. So whatever shift, whatever diversions take place from there, we are there, our systems are there, our policies are there to take care of, to take advantage of that. And going from $650 billion to $1 trillion over a period of 5 years should not be a challenge. And the second one, there are international estimates available that our transaction costs and logistics costs has some very low-hanging fruits, and maybe it can be, one of the OECD studies say up to 13 to 15% of that can be cut over a period of less than 3 years by following a certain paradigm, a certain set of policies, a certain set of implementation follow-up. So these 2 provide India enough scope to perhaps add another $350 billion in next 5 years to its present level of exports of goods and services and meet that challenge of international. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Om Hisaria, for sharing your insights. And now we invite Mr. Najib Shah, former Chairman CBIC and Chair of this very session, to please share his insights and his observations and concluding remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. We have heard three very erudite speakers. Kunio giving us an overview of World Customs Organization and all the initiatives which it has put in place, and the hope that the Indian Customs Administration will also ensure that all these recommendations of the WCO are put in place. To react to what he had suggested, I think the Indian Customs Organization has, over a period of time, put more than all these provisions in place. Mani did mention about PESEL. We don't have PESEL in the format which the WCO has been engaging. But having said that, every customs administration at the level of a custom house does have very regular, intense trade discussions with the importers and exporters in that particular custom house. And at a macro level, the board also does have interactions. But yes, that's a point well taken about the need for having a more focused discussion. The challenge which the customs administrations globally have faced have been unprecedented in the last 2 years. COVID was something which nobody anticipated. And the role of customs, as Mani did point out, from a mere collector of taxes to much, much more than that, has evolved dramatically. And I do not agree with the suggestion made that facilitation is a byproduct of our primary role of being collectors. Trade facilitation has been the focus of all customs administration simply because the volume of trade has been increasing. It has to be technology-driven, it has to be risk-based, and you had no choice but to ensure that the less risky consignments are given speedy clearance. And all this came to play dramatically during the COVID period, when the customs played a crucial role in ensuring speedy clearances of consignments. In fact, unprecedented was the finance minister's observations in the budget speech about the role played by the Indian customs, where she acknowledged that they had shown agility, they had shown the impact of technology, they were faceless in their assessments, and ensured speedy clearance. Unfortunately, like Mr. Hisaria has been mentioning, protectionism has taken the garb of nationalism, unfortunately. Now, while protectionism and Atmanirbharata are necessary, ultimately exports are the result of an environment domestically available for good manufacturing. Unless you have a good manufacturing infrastructure and ecosystem, you're not going to export. I'm not going to be in a position to export if I do not have the necessary facilities for manufacturing within the domestic setup. So I firmly believe the two go hand in hand. You can't have exports without having a good domestic environment, and you can't have mere manufacturing for your domestic requirements. You necessarily have to export. What globalization has taught us is the huge interdependence amongst all countries. The free trade agreements which India has been pushing for, and the last one being with UAE, are a recognition of the fact that you need to be part of the global value chain, are the recognition of the fact that each country has a certain strength, and we need to capitalize on that strength and ensure that you add to the global value chain seamlessly. Again, the role of the customs is crucial in this entire process, and FTAs brings with that huge challenges again for the customs administration, because remember, each FTA has a different rule of origin. And that is a crucial element for ensuring that my benefits are extended only to those products and those countries which fulfill the requirements of that rule of origin. So this is another challenge which all customs administrations have to face with increasing number of FTAs, and FTAs with countries like UAE, about which, quite frankly, I have my great skepticism about. It's not a manufacturing hub, it's a trading hub, are going to pose challenges for all customs administrations, especially the Indian customs administration. Trade, I'm very optimistic, has to increase. It is a cyclical process which happens. The developments which have happened in the last 2 years are unprecedented. COVID was something which nobody anticipated. The Ukraine-Russia conflict, again, is going to have an impact. Prices are going to shoot up. Supply chains are going to get disrupted, which means, again, we have to ensure that we show agility, as in the Indian Customs Administration shows agility and speed to ensure there's no blockage of clearances. The Indian Customs Administration, I speak as a former chairman, has been reacting positively to ensure that concerns of the trade and industry are met. I'm sure all of you are aware of the fact that time release studies are constantly being done by the customs. Each custom house puts in the public domain exactly the time taken for the clearance of goods. And it has dramatically improved over the last few years. We do realize that time is money, and we cannot afford to not ensure speedy clearances. The Indian Customs Administration has put in a single window, which is a unique achievement in ensuring that all clearances required from multiple departments of the Government of India are addressed in a single technological tool, and that has expedited exports phenomenally. IceGate has been a huge success. It has had challenges, like all technology does have challenges, but over a period of time has been a huge success and has become very stable. The risk management system that the Government of India has put in place has again played a crucial role in ensuring that this balance between facilitation and enforcement takes place. Remember, the customs administrations globally, and especially in the Indian context, because of their location, have a crucial role to play in the safety of the country. Now, people overlook the fact that they are crucial custodians, not only of the economic frontiers of the country, but also of various other aspects of the economy, flora, fauna, the environment, the security-related aspects. The customs have a huge role to play, and going forward, all these roles are only going to magnify, they're going to increase, and the challenges of the customs administration will be to ensure that they keep abreast of these changes. Skill development is an area which is something which we need to constantly keep addressing. Mr. Kunio had mentioned about the need for that, and that can't be overemphasized, because that is so very important if we are to be partners of trade and industry, because both need each other and both need to learn with each other. I take the point made by Mr. Mani that there's greater coordination required, and I think the trust which has been reposed now on the industry in the form of AEOs is something we should carry forward in various other aspects and learn to trust the trade a little more. And I'm sure the trade and industry will repay back the trust in spades. Thank you so very much, and we are now open for questions, if any.